So as a channel dedicated to game art, I do get to talk a lot about it, but I never quite get to discuss what I think of it. So just fun, I thought I'd make a video ranking art from different games, discussing what I think is good about them and what's bad about them. The ranking itself might not matter too much, so don't get too angry. I will have some potentially controversial opinions. On some points you'll definitely disagree with me, but such is life. So I thought we'd start with perhaps one of the more controversial opinions, which is Super Mario Odyssey, or Super Mario as a franchise overall, where I think I would actually place it as B tier. To me, it feels like Super Mario was made at a time when games were made mostly for gameplay's sake, and there were huge restrictions on what type of game art you could make. So they ended up making kind of weird choices. A plumber who saves a princess, weird humans that don't make sense, weird animals or enemies that don't make sense. It feels kind of like the franchise overall is extremely good artists making subpar art because that's part of the IP. At the same time, I can't give it too bad of a rating because it's excellent art. The animations are good, the character design is awesome, the areas themselves can be really good. It's just that it feels like very little of it fits. It's one of the biggest franchises, I just don't think it makes the greatest art. As a contrast, we have Zelda. Where Zelda, and this is Zelda Breath of the Wild, but I think it goes for the entire franchise, almost all games have S tier art. They make nice stylistic choices for almost all of their franchises, where it kind of merges that cozy feeling with something kind of adventurous. And at the same time, I feel like there's quite coherent world building. The weapons, the technology, all of it quite fits the same type of world. And on top of all of that, it's just extremely polished. And I feel like you can kind of feel that where games that want to copy Zelda are games like Genshin Impact, like big franchises. Whereas with Super Mario, it's mostly beginners that want to copy Super Mario because that's easy to do. Zelda, you want to copy it because it just consistently makes good decisions and it really nails a vibe. So next we come to my game art. I thought it'd be fair if I rank game art, also rank where I place my own. And I would place my own, as of now, at D tier. And it's for one major reason. I think I sometimes make scenes that are really quite good. They have a nice art style, nice art direction. It nails a mood. It's just that I feel like I do that well sometimes and sometimes not. It's the type of art that can be quite decent. It's just quite uneven. As the game I'm making at the moment, I really hope I can elevate that level. But as of now, it's really coherent and nice in many ways. It's just quite boring at the same time because I'm mostly trying to make the game exist. And I feel like taking that all together, I just can't give it that high a rating. If you have an uneven quality in your art, I think that kind of shows through at the end of the day. It can still make people want to enjoy the game or play the game. I think it just leaves the game with a bit of an amateurish quality, which isn't ideal. So if I want to raise my own level, I think I need to get more even. So next we have Diablo 3, and I picked Diablo 3 for a specific reason. I think the IP itself is really good. It has a good identity. I feel like if you compare Diablo 2 to Diablo 3, Diablo 3 art style wise is a step down. They took this dark and gloomy game and kind of made it more goofy and nice feeling. It's still the same quality. It's just worse art given the customer they were cultivating. Still great art. Blizzard overall has always had great art. But I feel like taking a good franchise with great art and sort of reducing it, I just don't want to give it higher than a C. Next we have Shovel Knight, and I would actually give Shovel Knight a D tier as well. The reason I would give Shovel Knight a D is not necessarily that I think that the artists themselves are bad. I think it suffers from the same problem that Mario Odyssey has, wherein it's trying to copy old art that was really restrictive, like unnecessarily restrictive, and doesn't look that great. And I think it took that, made a great character. The individual characters on Shovel Knight are really great. Made the environments kind of boring, dull, and limited. And then I think on top of it, I don't really like the color schemes in Shovel Knight. It's one of the few things that they went kind of wild with. Still a decent game in other regards. I just don't think that the art is necessarily what makes it great. The Witcher. I think The Witcher is a solid A tier. It really does what it does great. It doesn't feel unique or like it races above anything, but it serves an audience and it does it quite perfectly, I think. And it's just high quality overall. The designs of the monsters are nice, the environment is nice, but I don't think it amazes anyone either. So next we have Stardew Valley. And I might get some flack for this, but I would place Stardew Valley in D tier as well. I think if it's one thing that Stardew Valley does well, it's that it sort of targets an audience quite well. But Stardew Valley is one of those games where you can generally see that the person making it is not a professional artist. It's kind of like the same when you look at my art. I think if you compare Stardew Valley to Fields of Mystria, Fields of Mystria is just a more coherent game. You might like Stardew Valley more, and you might like Stardew Valley's art style more, but I feel like it's definitely worse art. Like if I want to nitpick with Stardew Valley, it never keeps a consistent projection. It's sometimes oblique and sometimes like axonometric, but it feels like it doesn't do so intentionally. But it does so because it doesn't really know the difference between these two projections. Next we have Manifold Garden. And I don't know how many of you have actually seen this game, but for me it's an S tier. It's really simple. There's maybe not that much art in it, but the art that is there really elevates the game. I think it's a fairly decent and fun game, but I will be honest and say that I bought it just because I like the art of it. There's not much art stuff that I can discuss as examples on how to apply it to yourself, because in some ways it's so simple. It kind of relies on its repetitive nature and the scope of it. But I also think that it executes on what it goes for so well that I can't really give it any less. It's stylistically simple, but great. Next we have Tales of Iron. I would say A tier. It has this kind of storybook vibe. It has really cool characters, and it really goes for one thing and nails that quite perfectly. I really have very few complaints on it. Even the UI and the menu, everything is great. So next we have Portal. I think I would probably place Portal in S tier. I feel like it goes for something quite simple, but the kind of clean sci-fi feel and sterile environment is really just great for a puzzle game. I think the games themselves are excellent puzzle games, but it's one of those games where you see it and you kind of want to buy it just because of how it looks. And there are some aspects where it doesn't take itself too seriously that kind of elevate it even further. And so there's an element where it's like not only the art style, but the voice acting and stuff like that that plays a part. But I do think that as a coherent package, it just takes great gameplay and elevates it to a game you would recommend to anyone. Then we have Ori. And now it feels like I'm giving a lot of S tiers. It'll probably change further down the line. I feel like what Ori does really well is the environments themselves. They're really punchy and colorful and kind of makes the whole world feel kind of magical in a sense. I think the biggest downside with Ori is that even though it's great art, there's just not that much that you can apply to your own game art, because it just doesn't have the same art pipeline as a solo developer would. At the same time, when you see it, you kind of just want to make your own art because it inspires you. But overall, great game art and one of the best platformers out there. Next we have Hollow Knight, and I can't do much but give it S tier. I think it's one of those games that inspired too many people to make platformers and game art overall. And it's also inspired people to make a certain type of game art, especially in terms of how you construct your levels with the type of parallax you use. I think what's sad with Hollow Knight is that it does so many things well, and it's such a unique platformer in how famous it is, that people have started building a grudge against games that are somewhat similar, which sucks because I don't think Hollow Knight does that many things uniquely. It just does them really well. But I think it's one of those games that look really great, but beneath it is also quite simple to make. And that's really cool. You can learn so many things from Hollow Knight. And now we come to Gris. For me, it's an S tier. Probably the art I like the most in a game. Kind of don't want to compare it to most game art because it's less art for the game's sake and more art for art's sake. And ever since I saw Gris, I've kind of been leaning towards making my art more watercolor-like. Partly because I paint traditional art with watercolor, but also because I think it really looks cool. I think the downside with Gris is that it's too expensive to make for most artists, and it feels like the art was more important than the gameplay, so the gameplay itself is kind of so-so. But as an art piece in and out of itself, I don't think many games beat it. Then we have Enter the Gungeon, and I would place Enter the Gungeon at B tier. Really great art. I think it really goes for a coherent and clear thing, and it does it really well, and it's funny art. And I would say that I think that many people would buy Enter the Gungeon solely on its art. At the same time, I think that it's fairly safe art. It doesn't make anything new, and it's not that exciting, so really not much to complain about. The thing you want to discuss the most about it is its use of 3D, but that doesn't really make a difference when you see it. Nonetheless, great art. Dota 2. I would place Dota 2 in C tier. If you've watched my channel, you probably know that I'm a Dota player. It's by far my favorite game of all time. Individually, the art is great. It just doesn't have any identity whatsoever. All different heroes feel like they're from different universes, and it just goes for all different types of things all at once. By no means bad, but I also think it doesn't really want to make you play it either. The one thing I think that really does make you want to play it are the hero voice lines. But I do think it suffers from the same thing that a lot of other games, like Super Mario, where there really isn't any coherency in the IP itself. Then we have Steamworld Dig, and I would sadly place Steamworld Dig in D tier. The thing is, I think the artists that made Steamworld Dig are really good. I just don't like any of the artistic decisions. I can use an example of how to do a thing because there's a really great level of polish. I just don't like how the characters look. I don't really like the vibe of the art style in and out of itself. I can't complain about anything. I can only praise it for things it does well, but I also don't like it. Next we have Lone Fungus, and I feel like I maybe don't want to do it, but I would probably place Lone Fungus in F tier. And I don't want to frame F tier as necessarily extremely bad, because all of these games released and most of them have done successfully, and there are degrees to bad. I just feel like the creator behind Lone Fungus is a better game developer than he is an artist. And on top of that, it feels as if he was really quite restricted in how much time he felt had to spend on the art. So it feels sometimes as if the game art was kind of rushed. Still, game art that is good enough for me to want to buy it and play it. Do kind of like the vibe of the game. I just think that from the perspective of the game itself, I think the game is better than the art suggests. Next we have Nine Souls, and I would place Nine Souls in A tier. There's not much to complain about. Cool art direction, cool world building, going for this kind of sci-fi samurai kind of vibe. I do really like how it incorporates shaders with sprite animations. It's just overall a great game. If Nine Souls came before Hollow Knight, I would probably place Nine Souls at S tier and Hollow Knight at A tier, but as it stands, I just don't think it stands out that much, even though it's perfect in every way, and so A tier it is. Next we have Dust, an Elysian Tale. I will give it D tier. I think Dust suffers from the same things I do, which is quite uneven art. It's like somewhat cool characters, but the environment design is kind of hit or miss, and a lot of the game art really doesn't aid gameplay. It can sometimes be difficult seeing where platforms are, and some enemies aren't designed in a way that matches their attack patterns. And I think it's just a kind of clunky game in a sense. It's not necessarily bad, but it lacks a certain quality. It doesn't help that it isn't my taste in art style either. And I think the same thing happens kind of for Astern Noctis. I think Astern Noctis really nails a vibe quite well, but I think it's one of the more egregious examples of art that makes the gameplay worse. It's really difficult sometimes to make out where things are and what you're gonna do. It just has really poor readability. It annoyed me to such an extent that I even made a video on it. Astern Noctis feels like art made by a person who has never played a game in their life. I don't think the art is bad to such an extent that you wouldn't see it and then want to play it or buy it. But at the same time, there's so much stuff there that also just makes the game not nice to play. Then we have Celeste, and I would place Celeste at A tier. I feel like one of my main complaints of pixel art is that it doesn't offer you enough pixels to make your game art unique. But I think how Celeste mixes its game art with HD art just really works. It's one of the better examples of pixel art, especially when it comes to low-bit pixel art. It's not unique, but it does everything it does really well. Next we have Cuphead, and I think Cuphead would go to S tier. It does its own thing, and it does it extremely expensively and uniquely, that it's just in a league on its own, for good and for bad. But I don't think you can give it any less than an S tier, given how many people buy it purely based on art. I think this actually goes for all the S tiers so far. These are games where you would probably buy it regardless of how bad the gameplay was. Luckily, all of these games so far are actually also good. Next we have Islets, and I would actually place Islets in B tier. It's one of my personal favorites. I definitely like it even more than Nine Souls and Tales of Iron. Also an example of extremely efficient art. I'm extremely impressed by how quickly he can churn out games. But I also think that sometimes the fact that Kyle Thompson is so economical in his art, it makes his game art less than it could be. Still great. I think that there eventually will come a game of his that I would place in A or S tier. And I don't think Islet is there quite yet. Then we have Neon Abyss. No, I'd actually place this in D tier. Well executed, interesting vibe in a sense. It's just extremely boring and generic. It has its audience. That audience isn't me. Then we have Rayman. I think Rayman fits in the same kind of category as many other games. Rayman on PlayStation 1, I think it was really unique and way above a lot of other games. There are just aspects there that kind of show their age. I think it's just one of those games where the IP is more famous then it's good. Still one of the games I do recommend to kind of analyze at times, because the match between the game art and how it aids gameplay is really interesting. And overall, the environments are really cool. Thomas Was Alone. I'll place it in C tier. It's one of the examples people like giving, even I like giving, for making decent game art without being able to draw. But given how boring it is, I do think it actually goes for that vibe quite well. I think the same case goes for Kunai in a sense, so I'll also give it a C tier. Can't really complain about anything, but I also don't think that you necessarily buy it for the art. And I don't see that many people having it as their favorite game. It's kind of safe in a way. Not bad, but not great. Salt and Sanctuary. Kind of instant F tier for me. I know many people like it. To me, it just does so many things really poorly. And I honestly think that seeing it makes people turn away from it. The biggest issue by far is its readability issues, same as Astern Noctis. Whereas I think Astern Noctis kind of looks good at times. I wouldn't necessarily say the same thing for Salt and Sanctuary. It's one of those cases where I definitely feel as if the game is better than its art suggests. Super Meat Boy, I'd probably put it in F tier. There's stuff here that could be awesome, but it's really quite cheaply made. I think the character design and the capsule art really nails an aesthetic, and the game art itself is really serviceable. It aids in making the gameplay clear to read and play. The animations are juicy, but at the same time the environments are really boring. And given how good of a game Super Meat Boy is, I just think the fact that you like the gameplay makes you like the art, but I don't think the art on its own is that good. Throw the same art onto a worse game and I don't think that many people would give it a second glance. Pizza Tower. I really like what Pizza Tower is going for. I would give it an A tier. I think it goes for something unique and it does it really well. And at the same time, when you see it, it makes you think, why haven't anyone gone for this type of vibe before? Where it's like pixel art, but also not. Really not much to complain about. I really like the animations and the vibe overall. The only downside is that it isn't that flattering to look at. So for what it's going for, I think it does it really well. Still really unique and really cool. 8 Doors, F tier. By no means bad, and I do like the art direction and the world building, but it's just really quite stiff. And I think I liked it more when I saw the trailers than when actually playing it. Not a bad game and not terrible art, just I feel like the artists weren't good enough to execute on what it was going for. So I see a significantly higher potential than what I feel like it achieved. I feel like the vibe it was going for could have been A tier if it was made by a better artist. Still really cool. I do understand why people would like it and want to buy it for its art. Then we have Animal Well. I would probably throw Animal Well in A tier. Goes for something unique, executes on it really well. It really has a vibe, and it took a tricky medium, which is pixel art, and made it really unique. I think the only reason why I would still place it at A tier is that I feel like it at times could have been more. And I don't know how to phrase that better. Could have been more. It's like I see some potential there for something to wow me, but it really didn't at the same time. Next we have Emberward, C tier. It has the same problem as Kunai, where it's extremely serviceable. It looks good. There's nothing to complain about, but there's also not much there to specifically like. You see it, and if you think the gameplay looks fun, you buy it because the art looks made by professionals. But I do think that you buy it for the sake of the gameplay and not anything else. Then we have Candle. Candle I would place in B tier. It's really in a quite similar position as Islets. It's one of my favorites game art wise. Really unique, really cool. I do think that plenty of people buy it because of how it looks. I bought it because of how it looked. At the same time, it's not always that flattering. And there are times where I wonder if it could have been made better. It goes for something though, and I really like it. It's definitely great art. But it also has its own issues. Like, I don't know if it's the gameplay that's clunky or the art that's clunky or the mix of the two. But sometimes I feel like it's better art than it is game art, even though I do like it a lot. Teslagrad. I would place Teslagrad in D tier. I think the artists are better than their art. It just doesn't feel like it has coherent art direction at all. And there are plenty of things where assets look like they are from different games. I wasn't that big of a fan of the game itself, so that doesn't help. But I also think that the game art really doesn't make you want to buy it. Next we have Rainworld. And Rainworld is a solid S tier. It's definitely better because it's pixel art. And it just goes for something unique where all the things kind of line up to create a really good product. Great game art, great atmosphere. Just overall, really, really impressive. If you want to nail an atmosphere, really good example of a game to look at. Then we have Cult of the Lamb, an S tier. Made by great artists. Artists that know who their target audience is and executes on it really well. I think it's interesting looking at Cult of the Lamb and comparing it to Adventure Pals because it's made by the same studio. It's one of those instances where you can see that Cult of the Lamb does what Adventure Pals couldn't. Axiom Verge. I would place Axiom Verge in D tier. I don't think the artist is that good of an artist, but I do think he's really good at art direction. And he went for his target audience really well. So I think it's one of those cases where the game definitely has its audience, but it's in a similar boat as to Stardew Valley. It has many of those qualities that make the art feel uneven. You can see that some of the choices were perhaps not intentional, but made because the artist didn't know better. So, similar to me. Have a nice death. I think the game art is definitely better than the game. I will definitely place it A tier. Art is really good at aiding gameplay. And on top of that, it has really nice art direction. I don't think it does anything unique. It doesn't do much that you want to steal or get inspiration from, but it's just overall solid art. Great all the way through. Then we have Iconoclasts, and I would place Iconoclasts in C tier. I think Iconoclast is one of the games with the best world building. Like, I would, in some regards, place it not much below Tales of Iron or Hollow Knight in terms of world building. And so the things it does well, it does leagues above many other games. But sometimes it's a bit uneven in its artistic qualities. And I think the environments can themselves be quite boring. So whereas a lot of these games are in D tier because they're uneven, Iconoclast is in D tier because it's uneven, just slightly better. Next we have Fez. And I think I would place Fez in S tier. It's one of those pixel art games that people want to copy just because of how great it is. Really cool, really unique, really ahead of its time, and really not much to complain about. Then we have Bzzzt. And I think I would place Bzzzt in C tier. Extremely generic. But while it's generic, it's just really great. It's one of those games that I take inspiration from and try and learn from a lot of the time. Because how well polished it is. It's just that it polished something that I think was quite boring. I think he went for something slightly safer than he should have. Then we have Hyperlight Drifter, and I think Hyperlight Drifter is also in S tier. I think the game is better because it is pixel art, while at the same time feeling quite unique in its pixel art style. Overall, really cool look, really cool aesthetic, really cool world building, art direction, all of it great. And in many cases, I think it's a good game to look at and analyze, especially when it comes to world building. I think it does something quite unique and it does it really well. Then we have Ghost Song. I would place Ghost Song in B tier. It's quite efficient and empty, but what it does extremely well. It really nails an atmosphere, and there's not much to complain about. At times, it feels a bit too stale and a bit too safe, and that's perhaps because it needed to be somewhat efficient. Haiku the Robot I would place in D tier. Has nothing really bad going for it. It's just quite boring and quite safe and quite dull. Completely serviceable game art. Doesn't make you want to not play it, but I also think it doesn't necessarily make you want to play it either. Then we have Hoa, and Hoa I would place in C tier. Not because it's bad art, but because it's not the best game art. I don't think the game is that good either, but I do think that they focus so much on the art aspect of it that the game suffers because of it. I do think that people buy it because of how it looks, so it's by no means bad. It's just a really nice art style that is well executed. But that is, I think, what it has going for it. Then we have Guacamole. And I think I would place Guacamole in B tier. Goes for a thing and it executes on it well. It's fairly safe. Not bad, but not earth-shattering. Clearly made by good artists. I think Getting Over It is one of those examples of a game that clearly doesn't have good art. And Bennett Foddy is good at selling games and making nice gameplay. And so in this case, he just took a bunch of assets and made a game out of it. And it's a good game and people want to play it because the game is serviceable. But it also completely lacks art direction and it's just goofy and weird. The idea of it is more artistic than the execution of it. It's a cool game, nothing bad with it, but I don't want to elevate it and give it more credit than it's due. A lot of these games are going for something more out there and more interesting and offering something. And I just think that Getting Over It is lazy with its art, and it says so outright. Then we have Broforce. And I think Broforce is a B tier. I don't like what it's going for, but I know some people do, and I think it executes on it really well. I think some people would probably place it higher than I would, but to me it's in a similar category to Guacamole. It's good. Targets its audience well, nothing to complain about, but it also feels kind of safe and doesn't offer anything unique. Then we have Downwell, and I think Downwell, it's so safe that there's nothing much to nitpick, but I also don't think there's much here to like, because it's so simple. And I think if we compare it to the next one, which is Gato Roboto, which is also simple, it's also like mostly black and white and low-bit pixel art. I just think Gato Roboto does what it does significantly better. And so I would place Gato Roboto on B tier, but Downwell on F tier. Because I think while Gato Roboto does something simple, it kind of makes you want to play it. There's something there that's kind of cute. And Downwell is just inoffensive, but not that interesting. Then we have Spelunky. The game art is simple, safe, not bad, not too interesting. It does what it does well, but it's also really safe and slightly worse than Guacamole and Broforce. I think overall, the gameplay itself, the game, elevates the game art and makes you like the game art. Then we have Sheepo. And Sheepo is Kyle Thompson's first game, so the person who made Islets. And I think Sheepo is a significantly worse game, both gameplay-wise, but also art-wise. It has all the elements of what eventually became good with Islets, but it's also really Spartan in its environment. It's quite empty and unexciting. Cute characters, cute assets, but also quite lacking and empty in many regards. Then we have Abe's Odyssey, and I would place Abe's Odyssey in a solid S tier. I'm actually impressed seeing it again and looking back at it. It's a game I played when I was like 7 or 8, and it just has really good world building, really good art direction. And it made something really cool with quite limited hardware. Really 10 out of 10. No complaints. And we have Fall of Porcupine. Fall of Porcupine, solid A tier. Really awesome characters, quite cute environments. It does what it does great. It has really nice use of colors. I do personally think the game is quite boring, but the character design and the art overall is awesome. Then we have Fields of Mystria. And I think Fields of Mystria is B tier. As stated earlier, I think that Fields of Mystria sort of nails its art direction significantly better than a game like Stardew Valley. I haven't played it too much, so I don't know how fun it is, but I do think that its art is really clean and really well executed. It's not my vibe necessarily, and not the things I kind of like. At the same time, I feel like it's one of those games where if you want to learn game art, better to look at Fields of Mystria than it is to look at Stardew Valley. Because the artists that made Fields of Mystria really know what they're doing. One of the games that I come back to and look at when I want to make top-down game art. I would place Hades in S tier. It goes for a unique style and a unique thing. And quite difficult to execute thing. But it also does it really well. In some regards, it ends up in a similar category as Ori and Gris and Cuphead, where it's just difficult to take something from it, because what it does is something you can only do if you're a really, really good artist on a technical level, which many of us aren't, but you can't complain on it. Then we have Hue, and I would place Hue in F tier. My suspicion is that the artists behind Hue are actually quite decent artists. Like potentially better than me and potentially better than many of these. But they've made something that is really safe and quite boring. And I just think it could have been better and more exciting. By no means bad. It's just very Spartan and dull. But it does execute on it quite well. The next game, Isle of Arrows, you might actually buy it because of how it looks. It's a good game and quite fun as well. Especially for someone like me who likes tower defense games. But while it does execute on it well, I don't know if it offers much with it. It's quite clean. It's kind of like a mobile game in a way. It just looks really polished and well executed on what it's going for. Rogue Tower ends up in the opposite end, where I would place it in D tier. But in a way, I think it's quite a good grade for this game. I don't feel like Rogue Tower is made by an artist, but I still think it has good game art. I feel like if you aren't an artist and you don't like art, if you could achieve the level of polish and the vibe that Rogue Tower is going for, you'd be really happy. Because most people would see the game, they would see the gameplay, and they would be like, yeah, this seems like a nice game, and they would buy it. The art doesn't make you necessarily want to buy it, but it also doesn't make you want to not buy it. So it sits in this quite even category of good enough, and that's really good. Scalemania ends up in a different category, which is F tier, and that might be subjective, but I feel like with Scalemania, the artists are more ambitious than they have the skill to be, which kind of shines through, and it makes the game look more amateurish than it probably is. My suspicion is that the artists behind Super Scalemania are better artists than the developer behind Rogue Tower, but I think that because they do more stuff, the art itself ends up being slightly worse. I think my chief complaint about it tends to be that it looks kind of wallpaper-like, but overall the character design, the art direction, I'm not sure really what it's going for. It's not that coherent. But at the same time, it's clear that the artist can do art. It's not a bad artist. I just think this wasn't necessarily it. Then we have Wonder Boy. And I would place Wonder Boy in A tier. I could have placed it in S tier. I just think that it's working with quite bad original art. Wonder Boy is a remaster of a previous game, and so you can kind of toggle between the old art and the new art. And the artist behind Wonder Boy is an unbelievably good artist, and it just looks awesome. But I think it's working with material from 30 years ago. So the artist himself is more impressive than the art he created. I think the art direction and the world building in the original games was really quite bad, but he made it really good and really impressive. But because it's such a bad place to start, I feel like I can't give it much more than an A. Blasphemous I would have to place in S tier. I really don't like Blasphemous. I don't like how it looks. But my complaints about it are completely subjective because it's great art. It's just not my type of art. I think it goes for something really unique. It executes on it really well. The environment and the vibes are just really awesome. I just don't like it personally. Dead Cells, A tier. Nothing to complain about. Everything is executed well. It has a lot of cool tricks with like gradient shaders and 3D to 2D pixel art workflows. Cool stuff to pick from. It has really good juice and it's a fun game to play. And I think that the game art really elevates how fun the game is to play. I frankly have no complaints with it. I think it's an awesome game as well. And it looks great. I would place Super Magbot in F tier. Perhaps one of the more unfair F tiers. Because I wonder sometimes if the artist could perhaps even be better than me. It's well executed. It's just too safe. It feels uninspired and kind of boring. Boring world building, boring art direction. Really serviceable art direction. But I'm not sure I really like when I see a good artist make art that feels beneath them. And I don't really want to praise that. I feel like even though it's not bad and the artist isn't bad, this could have been better. Laika is one of those games I would probably place in A tier. I don't think that many people know about the game, but I do think it has great art direction. The world looks really cool, the characters look cool, it really nails that kind of Mad Max vibe. It has a cool concept as well. It's quite a fun game, and I also think it's a game you can look at for inspiration. Because it does some things with how its map is set up that is kind of unique, where it really doesn't feel that grid-like. It really feels like a world. But unlike Hollow Knight, which kind of makes its world by having a lot of blur or bokeh, or it kind of crams small assets and repeats them. Laika works with like bigger set pieces and larger set pieces, but still makes that kind of 2D environment come to life. And I think that's really interesting. It's quite Spartan and quite empty, but it incorporates that idea into its game art. And I think it's just a great game to look at if you want to make your own art, but not feel like you're copying Hollow Knight too much. Then we come to Inside, just squarely A tier. It does what it does really well. It really goes for a mood, and it does so really well. I think Umbrella also falls into A tier. That is very similar to Celeste, in that I feel like it could have been better if it was in HD. But it's really incorporated its pixel art so well that it just looks great. And there's nothing to nitpick about. I think plenty of people would buy it because of how it looks. And the art is really one of the things that elevate it. Cat and Onion. I really don't know how good the artist behind Cat and Onion is, but I'm still gonna place it in B tier. I think that this game goes for something weird, but it's artistically weird and it does it really well. I have nothing to complain about it because it feels like everything they did was intentional. The only thing that kind of degrades it is perhaps that what it went for isn't awesome, but it's still decent and kind of nice and fun. Not the best, but definitely good. The Night Witch. I think the Night Witch is kind of sad. I would place it in C tier. I think that the artists are up here, like they're really good. But I also feel like there's a reason why not many people know about it. And that's because there isn't much about the game that is exciting in and of itself. It's kind of safe art. You definitely see it and be like, oh, maybe I should play this game. Eastward I would place in A tier. I think that this game is probably better because it's pixel art compared to HD. It also looks really great and really unique. I feel like Eastward falls into the weirdest criticism by me, which is that it's kind of too perfect and too clean. It doesn't feel like it always has its own identity. Like the style is there and it's unique, but it feels like it doesn't have any idiosyncrasy. Kind of like with Fields of Mystery. It's just solid and perfect. The End is Nigh, and I would place this in C tier. Simple, like Thomas Was Alone or Super Meat Boy, but it just does it better than Super Meat Boy. I don't think it's that exciting art, but it just does what it does really well. Ender Lilies. I think Ender Lilies is a B tier. I don't like what it's going for, but I can't complain what it's going for. There are a lot of things you can learn from this game. I really like how it deals with perspective and how it incorporates the asset into the actual environment while aiding gameplay. Doesn't have this kind of a free-floating box that does nothing and makes no sense in the environment. It really incorporates the environment really well into its gameplay. But, and this might be unfair, I just don't really vibe with the art style. Camera Obscura, solid F tier. This is in my estimation an artist that isn't that great. The game has a cool idea. I just think that the artist should have done significantly less work, because the work that they do add kind of shows that they don't know quite what they're doing. It looks kind of messy and not clean and not intentional for the most part. Doomblade is one of those games where I'll place it in D tier. I think it's a hit or miss. It has cool colors and it's quite engaging, but it's also a bit too much and suffers from poor readability in my opinion. I would overall place it as kind of uneven art. Sometimes great, sometimes kind of bad. Greek I would place in B tier. I think this game looks great actually. It has a lot of the same qualities as Ender Lilies, where you can look at it and see how it incorporates assets into its game world. You can also see a lot of the cool stuff it does with perspective, and it just does a lot of unique stuff while also having a really high quality. I also think that the artist behind it is better than a lot of the artists behind games like Islets or Candle, or Ghost Song for that matter. At the same time, I prefer the art in Islets and Candle. There's this element where, same as with The Night Switch, there's not much I can complain about, but I think it's so perfect that it doesn't have its own uniqueness or its own quality at times. Still really good. Now we have almost no games left, and this took quite some time because I picked lots of games. Then we have Jump King. I'll place Jump King in D tier. I think the artists aren't that good, but they made a great character and they scoped the game really well. So they aren't showing any true mistakes. That just makes the game art serviceable for what they're going for. The game art doesn't hurt the game, but it doesn't really elevate it either. But I think it incorporates its limitation with its art style into making it kind of funny and goofy and nice. Kind of similar to Rogue Tower in a sense, getting over it. But I think that where getting over it is kind of lazy. I feel like Jump King does actually try something. Lapin. I think Lapin is D tier. I feel like it suffers from poor readability. It's kind of messy, but also quite cute. It's closer to what I like, so I do kind of like it. I probably do like it more than most of these games. I just think that it isn't that well executed. The separation between assets and just the dynamic range in the game is so low that it's kind of annoying to play in a sense. At the same time, I like that it's going for something unique. The Messenger, I might get hate for this, but I'm gonna place it squarely in C tier. I really don't like it personally. I think it suffers from the same thing Mario does and the same thing that Wonder Boy does. It goes for old art and old limitations when it doesn't have to. Obviously, in the case of the Messenger, it's kind of its gimmick, but I also think that gimmick is not that appealing. It's nothing I can complain about, but I also don't like it. A Robot Named Fight. I think it's in D tier. For a similar reason as the Messenger, it goes for something, it executes on it well. I don't think the artists are that great, but it does probably nail its target audience, even if that target audience isn't me. So I can't perhaps complain about it as much as I would like, but I also don't think it's much to write home about. Then we have Madshot, and Madshot I'll place in C tier. I think Madshot is one of the best examples of good readability, and it does some things really well. I just don't think it has the best art direction. Like, I don't know what it's going for, and it doesn't feel like it's going for something unique. It's one of those cases where I definitely feel like the artist is better than the art they created. At the same time, I think it's a great example of art to analyze. It really executes on the fundamentals really well. And if you're a beginner, I think this is a game that you should emulate. But I think at the same time, it's quite boring. And there we have it. It's a long list of a lot of games. I'm bound to have made some of you people disagree with me. And I know this was a long video. I just didn't know which games to leave out. I did give my reasoning for why I placed the games where they were, but feel free to discuss these things with me in the comments. I'm willing to change my mind. Thanks for watching. Bye.